Every great zombies Easter egg ends with an epic zombies boss fight, and in this video guys I'm going to be ranking every single zombies boss fight from worst to best. That means covering everything from the inception of boss fights in Black Ops 3, IW, World War II, and Black Ops 4. This list is going to be heavily swayed based on my opinion, and if you guys agree or disagree, I'd love to hear it in the comments. There are 23 boss fights that we're going to be looking at in this video, and I'd love to know in the comments, what is your number one? I can't wait to dive into this one, so I'm not going to waste any more time, but if you do enjoy this video at any moment, look how long this video is. 23 boss fights, 23 maps. This took forever to put together, so if you do enjoy this video, just spending 1 second to click the like would be absolutely awesome. So coming in as the worst boss fight in all of zombies goes to the Beast from Beyond. Now the reason why I'm putting this so low is just the fact that it just does not feel like a proper boss fight in comparison to what came before this map in Infinite Warfare, as well as what it's ranked up against. It was amazing to have the experience of the Extinction Cryptids back again after waiting so long since Ghosts. And this boss fight is pretty difficult from my own experience, but it's also not very fun whatsoever. All it is a big fest of just non-stop spawning cryptids and rhinos that just pack a ridiculous amount of health. There's no real mechanics at all to this boss fight besides the laser on the ceiling. I just feel there could have been so much more done considering the Extinction Cryptids were back, and the fact that it's just so underwhelming in comparison to what comes after you complete this Easter egg with the Super Easter egg. It just felt like they didn't really try with this boss fight. Coming in after this is the Frozen Dawn from World War II zombies. I don't think a lot has to be said here. It's a fantastic looking boss fight, and it is impressive just to watch how the boss operates, but it is not fun by any sense of the imagination, and I go so far as to say as to rank this joint bottom along with Beast from Beyond. There are some interesting components to this boss fight, such as the boss releasing a map-wide fireball which you have to teleport through in order to damage him by his throne. Aside from that, it is a very forgettable boss fight and not particularly fun. Coming up next is the Darkest Shore from World War II zombies, and this map already had a pretty bad rep from dynamic fog covering the map, which already is not favorable by a lot of fans, but this boss fight is pretty underwhelming, and all that it involved was about 2 or 3 sort of mutated moichulars, which were the main sort of new enemy type which would spawn every few rounds in the map. And the mechanics behind defeating it was simply using your pummel, which would drain some of its health, and then you'd have to just use bullets on it. Now, unlike the previous 2 maps, this one doesn't even have a boss area as such where you teleport to in the map. It just takes the portions of the map and has you teleporting from different section to different section, so that inevitably on the final section you'll do enough damage where you will have defeated them. I'd say this boss fight was definitely pretty intense, but it just felt very, very lacking in what people expected from a map like this. Coming in straight afterwards is the Tortured Path, and this is a very weird one to rank in itself because it's 3 maps in one, right? But 2 out of the 3 boss fights in this are boss fights recycled from previous DLC maps, so that already puts it at a disadvantage. But the one new boss fight we got was pretty mediocre. This was a brute called the Guardian. It's a pretty traditional boss fight by simply shooting him to inflict damage, but after a while he will go back to his main spawn point and drain blood, which actually heals his health. So that's an interesting mechanic, but definitely not something which is going to throw a lot of you off, and it's just pretty mundane and boring, just using the rest of the map to train him around and just inflict damage. That's why he belongs here. But the next map we have is not that much better, but we're putting the Shadowed Throne in here. This was a interesting boss fight. It had a unique location being inside an airship with a lot of interactive moments, which I quite enjoyed. The main boss fight being the Stad Jaeger, and all that you'd need really to complete this boss fight is to use your harpoon gun to really drain the energy from him, and then using normal bullets. Also, this was quite an intense boss fight from the different varieties of zombies that would spawn in along with the boss itself. And then narrowness of the play space, making it quite awkward for you to really be able to time using that harpoon gun to your best because you get swarmed by the undead. Definitely not a memorable boss fight by any means, but I'd still rate it as probably the second best from World War II, and also it's probably the second best map on the game. Next up on our list is going to be the Rat King from Shaolin Shuffle. It was definitely a unique boss fight for sure, because it involved doing sort of challenges for the Rat King whilst in that boss fight arena, such as shooting down tons of targets, protecting a skull from being damaged by too many zombies, as well as killing zombies on top of green sewage to get rid of it within a certain amount of time. It was definitely a lot of interesting concepts to throw into a boss fight, which definitely challenges the player, but I feel overall it just doesn't make it for a fun gameplay experience. Some of you may disagree and want to put this higher up on the list, but I just don't think it's the strongest boss fights that IW Zombies has. It's coming in just after Shaolin Shuffle is Rave in the Redwoods. And for me, this is probably an average boss fight in the game. It's not too difficult, but there isn't too much involved. All that really is involved in this boss fight is filling up different sections with zombie soul kills and shooting specific parts of the super slasher before really putting some damage into him. The whole map is super unique as a whole, let alone this boss fight. But to me, there just isn't enough involved with the actual boss itself to feel truly like a great boss fight. But coming in after Rave in the Redwoods is Shadows of Evil, which is the OG when it comes to boss fights, and I was pretty surprised I put it this low, but I think in comparison to everything else that the rest of Black Ops 3 had to offer with boss fights, this is just a bit too simplistic and there's not much involved in Shadows of Evil's boss fight. It's simply just shooting someone a few times and then holding square on a table. There's not really much to it, but it is the original boss fight, so we have to at least give it some credit where it's due. Coming in next is Zetsubou no Shima. Now this is a very interesting boss fight when placed in Black Ops 3, which has just so much incredibly epic cinematic boss fights that this feels a little lackluster, which is why I'm placing it here as number 9. All it involves is just killing a ton of zombies and shooting Takio's arm when it appears. There's not really much else to say. It's not that engaging or interesting, but I guess it does test the weaponry you've brought in with you as well as your ability to survive in such a small tight space. Coming in at the number 10 spot is going to be Blood of the Dead. Now, I'm not a massive fan of this map in general, and this boss fight I felt could have been so much better than what it was. It starts off with this humongous Brutus, which you're thinking you're going to be fighting and it's going to be absolutely epic, but it doesn't really turn out to be that way whatsoever. All it involves is just a lot of zombie killing, and then eventually Brutus is going to spawn in a bubble which you need to be inside. You just destroy the 3 little bubbles within that and then shoot the dark mechanism with your shield blast, and that's really all there is. Kill a few more zombies and then boom, boss fight complete. It doesn't even really feel like a boss fight in my opinion, especially with just what was at stake when it came to that map. It just felt like they could have done so much more, especially when there is a heavy emphasis on apophicons within this boss fight with the language that Brutus speaks to us. But coming in now at number 11, which is the midway point, is Dead of the Night. And this is a pretty decent boss fight in my opinion, because it takes one of the biggest threats in the map and just has it in a much bigger scale. We have a separate boss fight arena for it. There is some mechanics involved in order to trap the boss and do damage to him, which I enjoy. It's definitely not the most epic of boss fights in Black Ops 4, which is why I'm putting it here, but there is at least some sort of strategy involved when it comes to taking this guy down, which is why I'm ranking it higher than Blood of the Dead. Coming in at number 12 is the Final Reich, which is the launch map from World War II Zombies. Now I think from design alone, this might be one of the most freakiest boss fights we have ever had in Call of Duty Zombies, but there are some interesting mechanics in this which I feel deserve it to be up there as a very good boss fight. Straight away you have this humongous boss which is just following you around all the time. You have to take your focus away from that to focus what's happening in the sky in order to bring down the Uberschnell, which you then need to kill a load of zombies around to charge it, and then have to take the boss down to plant it on him. It's a really cool mechanic that you only have a few split seconds in order to do that onto him, in order to inflict damage onto him and inevitably beat the Easter egg. It's not the greatest boss fight in the world, but it's definitely not the worst. Now coming in after at number 13 is going to be Revelations. I think when this first came out and this boss fight was experienced, it was quite incredible to see the room change with all these different elemental effects, which was really cool. But all in all, it was just a reskin of the Shadows of Evil boss fight with a few more elements taken involved, which all accounted to you taking out a few Margwas each time. The end result with that boss fight was the exact same thing that you did in Shadows of Evil, so I can't really rate it too high for recycling a mechanic used in a previous boss fight, but the fact that there are two sort of separate boss fights, if you want to call them that, is pretty cool in my opinion. And the stuff that happens before the Shadow Man boss fight, something we've never seen before in zombies, and it's super cool. So coming in after this is the classic boss fight from Zombies in Spaceland, which is the Alien. Now I really enjoyed this boss fight and still do to this day because it involves a lot of skill. There is a degree of timing involved as well when it comes to knowing when you're about to damage the core on that alien enough that you can go ahead, run up to it and smack the back of its power cores. And with it restricting you to only the first parts of the map, it really tests your skill in being able to traverse around that with a ton of zombies, as well as the aliens' sort of predictable movement. Also think it's truly one of the first boss fights we've ever seen which involves a boss actually being able to shoot back at you. And also this boss fight is pretty unique for if you are playing with more than one person, you're going to have more than one boss to take down, which is really cool. And for IW's first outing as a boss fight, I think it was really good. Coming in at number 15 is going to be Ancient Evil from Black Ops 4. I really enjoyed this boss fight because it's split into two parts. You have the first being to take down Pegasus and then having to take down the Zombie King. The arena for this is very unique and there is a bit of tactic involved as there are 3 separate islands which you have as playable space, and you're able to jump between each one, with each area becoming unavailable the more you progress through this boss fight. The fact that you need to keep jumping between these areas keeps you on your toes and keeps you thinking, which I really like. Aesthetically, this is also a gorgeous boss fight as well, from the arena you're fighting into the way that Pegasus has just transformed in this. It was a pretty great boss fight. Not the best, but still pretty damn good. Coming in straight after that at number 16 is Alpha Omega from Black Ops 4. Now I enjoyed this boss fight for a few different reasons. The first being that it is the Avogadro you're fighting, which is pretty nuts, but it also compromises you to one area at a time where it's very close quarters, and the Avogadro is always just a few moments away from nearly insta-killing you. I do think filling up containers with souls is a little bit of a cheap cop-out for a boss fight, as there isn't anything involved directly in hurting him, but I'm basing this decision over its intensity and how it feels to complete this, and it's really damn satisfying. Coming in at number 17 is going to be Tag der Toten. And this is probably a very interesting one, especially placing it this high up in boss fights, because there isn't a boss fight in this. But what you do get is an incredibly intense few moments inside of zombies before you get to that ending cutscene. Seeing the entire map transform into a hellish lava infested land is an incredible thing which you've never seen happen before in zombies, having a complete skybox and complete map change like that, and with the intensity of having to always keep moving, and especially when you have those moments where you are in a very tight area having to kill a load of zombies in order to progress, especially that final section in the facility, it is heart pounding, and I think it always will be. Every time I play this and get to that part, I'm always scared and worried that I'm not going to make it, and when you do, it makes it all the more satisfying. Coming in at number 18 is going to be Attack of the Radioactive Thing. Now I'm sure this is going to surprise a lot of you for me putting it so high up on the list, but there are so many mechanics to this which make it really unique compared to any other boss fight. The first being just how big this is. This has to be the biggest boss fight in all of Call of Duty Zombies, even bigger than potentially the one from the final right. It is a two-step boss fight which involves using lasers at the beginning in order to take this thing down, and then ending with one of the most frustrating but yet rewarding sections ever, where you have to use some serious team coordination in order to tackle this final section, which involves a laser maze, where if one person person messes up, it is game over, and it is so intense trying to make your way all the way over to this with all players completing it before going and teleporting into the belly of the beast and then taking it out by activating a nuclear bomb. I would have to say this is probably one of the most frustrating boss fights out of all of the ones that I've ranked, but it also, just mechanic wise and just how it's executed, is fantastic, and that can't be denied. With that out of the way, we are now on to the top 5, which is huge. So coming in at the 5th best boss fight ever is going to be 9 from Black Ops 4. I think the sheer scale and brilliance at how well this boss works is just a testament to how great this map is as a generally great experience. Having not one but 2 humongous zombie elephants to go up against, where it has live soldiers on top of it firing arrows at you, you have zombies, you have tigers, you have other bosses coming up against you whilst you're trying to tackle in this big gladiator arena. It's just an absolutely phenomenal boss fight. It's definitely an easy one with how many max ammos you get. It's almost impossible to mess up with this boss fight, but it's still incredibly fun. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Gorod Krovi from Black Ops 3. This is just a bonkers boss fight where it's like, take a normal boss fight and then have it on steroids and you've got Gorod Krovi. I just love how we have this dynamic where Nikolai is helping us out in this mech. We have to take down a dragon who just breathes fire on the entire arena, forcing you to use your dragon shield, and then after that we go up against Nikolai himself. This boss fight is just bonkers and I absolutely love it for that. It feels really great to be able to complete this, especially if you have something like the Ray Gun Mark II, which makes this boss fight an absolute cakewalk. But the fact Nikolai sends in raps is absolutely insane. He's definitely a very unique boss to come up against, but I absolutely love that, and that's why it's number 4. Coming in at number 3 is the true OG of boss fights, and this is going to be Der Eisendrache. This was truly where the boss fights in zombies really began. Shadows of Evil was just the appetizer before the main course. Der Eisendrache was just an incredible experience, and that boss fight truly changed zombies boss fights forever. If you don't know what you're doing, this is absolutely brutal because it contains a wipe mechanic which can end the entire game right there and then. It's got everything you'd want in a boss fight. It's got a huge keeper, it's got tons of zombies, it's got panzers. It's truly a unique boss fight. It started everything and it still is one of the best boss fights we've had yet in zombies. Coming in at number 2 is Voyage of Despair. Now, despite how much I talk about this map being a bad map, and a lot of you guys will probably agree with me here saying that this map is pretty bad and it's not very fun to play, the Easter egg is a chore, but this boss fight is an absolute delight. This is one of the best boss fight experiences we have ever had yet in zombies, and I feel the fact it's in Voyage of Despair just makes this map very underrated. The fact that this boss fight is split up into multiple sections, which takes you across many areas of the map in unique situations. Every part of this boss fight is intense from the moment you begin to the end, and especially with that end, I've personally never felt more tense in a boss fight than I do when it comes to this final section, because there is a wipe mechanic very similar to Der Eisendrache, but rather than it being something which you can easily just avoid by hiding behind something, this is something which, if you don't inflict enough damage, which is something you can't tell if you've done or not until the moment it happens, you could instantly be wiped out and that's game over. This is just so intense, and the fact that it's one of the longest boss fights as well just drags that feeling on and makes it even more intense. You feel like you put your heart and soul into this boss fight, and when you complete it, it just feels absolutely incredible. Now, if this number 1 spot didn't exist, then Voyage of Despair would easily be the best boss fight in all of Call of Duty Zombies, but I think this is an easy win for this number 1 spot, which is going to be the super Easter egg boss fight on Infinite Warfare Zombies. This is just the ultimate boss fight for the most hardcore of zombie players. All you're given is one simple area of the map, which changes and mutates as you get in. It throws absolutely everything at you, and holds nothing back. On paper, it sounds like a pretty simple boss fight. All you have to do is stand in a ritual circle and just charge it up by killing zombies. But that couldn't be further from the truth. This throws absolutely everything you've ever experienced from all the zombie varieties, from normal to the hardest of bosses, and then you throw in some very unique boss moves from the devil himself, and you've just got one of the craziest, most intense boss fights in all of zombies. This is something which I've not mastered myself, and I bet a lot of you guys have hardly played or mastered either. This is seriously such a difficult boss fight that only the most hardcore of zombie fans are able to complete this quite casually and without any degree of difficulty. It's insane what Infinity Ward did with this boss fight, as it really did live up to everything we expected from a super Easter egg, and it still stands today as one of the greatest boss fights we've had yet in zombies. It's just so hectic, it's so intense, and you need to go through such a lot of effort just to be able to experience this if you're not playing the boss battle mode. But on that note, that is going to wrap up absolutely every boss fight in Call of Duty Zombies. That's until we get Black Ops 5 or anything like that. But if you enjoyed the video, I'd seriously love to know your thoughts in the comments section. You can check out my previous videos on your screen now, but if you did enjoy, slap a like rating, subscribe, and please request any other list videos you want me to make, such as like ranking all the Easter eggs inside of zombies, ranking the characters, perks, wonder weapons. Let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in another video very soon.